Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the podcast, host Craig Jeffery catches up with Mike Richards, Managing Director at the Treasury Recruitment Company and founder and host of the Treasury Career Corner. They discuss Treasury career changes amid COVID-19 and bring to light the current situation on Treasury positions across the globe. Topics of discussion include the changing dimensions of work, career mobility, and the work-from-home environment, the outlook on job recruitment, and key findings and trends from the ongoing Global Treasury Salary Survey. Listen in to this informative and engaging conversation to find out more.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Craig Jeffery. Today's Treasury Update podcast episode is with a friend of mine, Mike Richards. He's the CEO of the Treasury Recruitment Company. He's also the host of the Treasury Career Corner podcast, which releases their podcast on Tuesdays. Mike, welcome back to the Treasury Update podcast.
Craig, delighted to be back. And as we said, and we've said a few times, it's quite weird to be this side of the microphone and you asking me questions. I've got used to it now. 100 plus podcasts myself, just like yourself. It's great fun when we're grilling our guests, getting to know them and everything else. But when it's the other way, I'm just like, oh, me? What, you're asking me a question? Hang on, buddy. It's my turn. But no, I'll try my best and try and give some advice to people in this weird world that we live in nowadays. So, back to you, Craig, because it's your show.
So there's several different areas that I wanted to talk about that I was really interested in. One is about Treasury positions. You know, we're in this rebound from the depths of the COVID-19 economic impact. And I say that because one of the major banks' chief economists talked about, how we're already in recovery from the sharpest, deepest, fastest recession. But as we rebound from it, what are you seeing that's going on career-wise? And I know we talked a little bit earlier. You said there's some differences by region. So what are you seeing, and are things changing there?
In general terms, career-wise, this is what the listeners today, this is what Treasury professionals, I think, were born to do. It might sound like an ending closing statement, but it's more you guys out there, you're planning for this, you're getting ready for financial crises, you've got to focus on liquidity, risk management and everything else. And that was really something that sort of jumped out at me, that I thought, do you know what, this is what you guys were born to do, and you've been doing it in different places. And as you say, it's been different in different areas. As Craig mentioned earlier, we cover the globe and we recruit, predominantly UK, Europe, and the US. And each of the regions has been different. I think the pace of COVID, if you like, has been, and the reaction within different countries has been different, which has then had a slightly different effect, some commonalities, but a different effect with different people in different Treasury teams and Treasury departments. So,
is like, if you take the UK, for example, is it different, in general, or is it by specific industries, or what are you saying? Let's start in the UK, your home base.
Basically, people were continuing to recruit right up until lockdown. And then lockdown came, everyone said, right, work from home. You're not coming to the office for 6 months. I mean, I made the joke that any other year, that beginning of April, you'd said to someone, oh, by the way, you're going to work from home for the rest of the year, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, nice April Fools. And they're like, no, this is what's happening. Whilst it was previously seen as a benefit, people working from home, it's now a new norm in some ways that people are doing that. And I think there's had a positive effect in some ways, that people have been seen to sort of perform very well in certain situations. I think there is a negative effect, and certainly from talking to some of the UK operational level staff, very much ops, people have said about the use of technology and stuff like that. It's less about that. It's more the interaction. People have said about, but we have a Zoom call where we have a beer every Friday with all of the team and stuff like that. that's all right, but that's not sitting across a table and looking the person in the eyes. If a treasury analyst has a problem, they go, who do I look to? Hang on. Oh, they look to their right and there's a brick wall. Same to the left. Oh, how do I call? Do I call my boss? Do I call my boss's boss? I think it's still that working from home piece still has to be worked out. I think as we return, and that's what I'm seeing, and a lot of the talk is about coming back in September, and as everyone returns post vocation season, I think it will improve, but I think it's a bit more of a balance. And I think, certainly from the conversations I've had, one of the things I've picked up is that a lot of people will do maybe the working from home across the weekend. So the Friday and Monday, they'll be at home. Tuesday, Wednesday in the office, getting to, see people, getting together, some of the meetings still socially distanced, using sanitizer, doing all that stuff, face masks if need be. But then also maybe the Thursdays, a bit more of the focus day, as I do every week, and that's meeting clients, meeting candidates. So it's sort of it's a new norm. It's a new balance, really.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective on how it's going to change when we come back. It might be more remote. You mentioned I'm looking at the walls, whether it's brick or sheetrock or what have you. This, I don't know if you want to call it socialization, but the face-to-face, the ability to have these casual conversations, the broader conversations that people pick up on leading to discussions don't happen unless we're intentional. So how's this impacting things like mentoring, development, work on teams and projects? What's falling apart in the work from home, or what's the negative side of that?
Well, I think you nailed it there a little bit. It's not falling apart yet, but some of this pre-COVID, everything else. I'd be talking to treasurers. They'd be talking about how they were great technical treasury specialists and everything else. And then as we dug into it and people got more senior, we were talking a lot more with them. And I do still talk to them about how, they're more in charge of their teams and there's much more communication going on. They were technical specialists as treasury managers. Now they're communication specialists, coaching and mentoring treasury teams. I said, great. What training have you had on that? And they said, what? And I said, so you're acting as a mentor. Has someone sort of mentored you in the past, shown you how to do that with maybe your softer skills or your coaching or communication skills? And, if it's a video call, it's sort of, I get a blank face. If it's a call like this, there's a sort of long pause. And I think pre-COVID, people weren't, guys in Treasury weren't getting this coaching. And I think actually they're learning on the job now. I think a number of employers need to review this because they are stuck, if you like. They're trying to do it, but have they ever received any professional training? And the answer is usually no. I think it's in an area where guys in Treasury are doing well because they are people that will take a situation and run with it and make the best out of it and everything else. But I think there's a massive opportunity. So, someone out there listening, I said this again on the call with some big treasurers and the head of the UK Association of Treasurers. I said, if someone came out with a remote coaching course for treasury professionals, I think it would sell out 10 times over because they're going, how to, coach working from home team members, It's a massive issue, I think, that's, people are getting through it. But how temporary is it? Is it, there are some of our clients, one of the clients actually said that the Treasury team are only going to be expected to come into the office once a week, right up to Christmas, or sort of post-Christmas rather. So between now and then, they're not even thinking that we're not going to see you. That's 5 months away. They'll see you over Zoom, but not going to see you in person. Really, a very different situation than perhaps we've seen before.
As you're talking with people and discussing this, there's the initial everyone goes home, they're sheltering in place, and they're connecting. They got past the initial tech issues and they're working on the farther down tech issues. On the interaction side, did people take more steps to make sure they're communicating in the beginning? And is that lightened up at all as we've gotten farther, or are people being pretty consistent about making sure they're staying in touch with those who are?
It's the latter. I think that there was also, I had a podcast this morning with a really leading treasurer who they have been absolutely whacked sideways, a food services company. So, there are no food services. Nobody's getting on a plane, nobody's going to a school. So their revenues are, through the bottom, but they've raised massive amounts of liquidity and they'll ride out of it. But when I spoke to him about how they were getting on, and this is also comes through from other treasurers initially, and they were very proud of their teams and things. But I think initially they were just, let's cope, because no one knew how long it was going to last. It was different to the recession of 2008 because that was an unknown quantity. Everyone chucked every stimulus you could and you just had to sit on your hands and wait. This time people could plan their way out of it, but they were planning throughout it. They didn't know you can plan for it, but you can't predict to say, oh, it's over. It's over. We've got in Europe, they've got a second lockdown coming in Spain. They've got the various other bits. You're still planning for it, but in Treasury terms, and going back to the individuals, planning for it, right, everyone heads down, and then a couple of months in, they're like, oh, okay, this is different now. This is, it wasn't just, cope this bit. Again, I spoke to Sally Ding, treasurer of Heathrow, on this ACT panel. When I spoke to her, and we were talking live, and she said about how much more she's had to do on a personal level with the team. So sitting down, doing more individual one-to-ones, doing more support, not because they need it, but because she feels that they deserve it, sort of thing. So it was more of a giving thing rather than them going, oh, help me, because she just sensed that. And I think it was a really accurate way of doing it. And again, from the other treasurers that I've been having on panels and the other treasurers I've been talking to, it's not new to them, but it's more that it's a slightly more formal process, i.e. it's in the diary. Before it was, oh, should we just grab a coffee together? Now it's, you can't grab a coffee because you're 100 miles separated, you might be. So it's actually, right, let's sit down, let's do a Skype, let's do a Zoom coffee. And I think the treasurers that have done that are certainly showing greater signs of success, when they're coming out of this as well. And I think a lot of them are coming out with, renewed vision or renewed recognition rather from, say, the CFO. When I'm talking to them and saying, oh yeah, the CFO's really, stepped up, but also said to me, thanks for doing this. You really, and then again, a little bit more for FaceTime, because you treasurers and treasury professionals at the heart of this crisis, really, and getting us through the other side, sort of thing.
Yeah, the born for this type of environment, right? Treasury's born for turbulence, though we do enjoy the calm times between the storms. But one last item on this, how Treasury careers and the dimensions of work have changed. We're meeting by Teams, meeting by Zoom. How do you see this changing the interaction? I know you do recruiting, so you're on Zoom or Teams all the time, and does this help the introvert, help the extrovert, or is this just an adaptation situation?
I heard a phrase, and someone said that all the size of the Zoom windows are the same, no matter what level of seniority you are. It's okay. And then the follow-up to it was they felt that now the Treasury analyst's voice was being heard at the same level as a Treasury manager, as the same level as a deputy treasurer, same level as a treasurer, because everyone was equal and things like that. And I technical phrase, I thought that was baloney. I don't agree with it. I think that actually it will bring to the forefront some of the people that do have something to say. We do regular Zoom calls, as Craig just mentioned there. We've got a group Zoom call from our Bounce Back program. And the fact is, I've had a couple of treasurers on there who say nothing throughout the call. I've got a couple of treasury managers who really jump in, and as you say, I think it comes down to that introvert, extrovert, and we have to artificially bring out some of those introverts because they've got some great stuff to tell us and some great feedback. And would that be, is it helped by being on Zoom? Possibly, yes. I think it is, because you're able to tease them along, have a more of a planned conversation, if that's the right way. You think, oh, actually, I can bring Jane into this call, because you can specifically ask Jane a call. Would you necessarily do that in the break room or in the Treasury room, Treasury team where you're based and things like that? Maybe sometimes not. That Jane does get sort of overruled or doesn't really say much in a meeting. But in general terms, I think I don't see. Not everyone is an extrovert in Treasury, but introverts tend to still do very well because of their analytical skills, because of the things they can bring to the table and everything else. And I think Treasury is a very balanced discipline where people can actually contribute whatever their personality type. So, yeah, it is an interesting one, and I've seen it myself firsthand from a lot of these guys on these big Zoom calls, and I'm like, come on, join us.
Yeah, maybe that more Treasury people are introverts, versus being energized by discussions. They're energized by data analysis and then do it. Who knows? But some great points, Mike, there. I wanted to talk about Treasury career velocity or turnover. What's the job situation look like?
It's pretty static at the moment, but I think that's...
static low or
just paused. I saw, actually, I think it was from the AFP in the US. They did a study where they were saying that 80% of hiring was put on hold, and I was like, wow. I was shocked there was that much hiring going on, because I hadn't seen it. It was starting to. Q1 is traditionally quite quiet anyway, and actually there's a good point on this about bonuses and things like that. People were collecting their bonus. And then you traditionally see things start to lift up come March. People are saying, right, time for a move before, getting to the next cycle, my next bonus. And Mike, I want to make a move and everything else. And actually, that's just as March, April, boom, everything stopped. And there was still recruitment going on, but it tended to be much more at operational level. We had, we actually had 2 maternity leave requirements. And as one of the treasurers said, he said, well, she's having those twins, whether or not we get someone to replace her. I was like, right. He said, so we've got to replace her. And the person that is doing the job has been onboarded remotely, has never actually met face-to-face in the same room as the treasurer yet. But they've been recruited and they're onboarded as a senior treasury manager, doing a great job. And it's fantastic, actually. But that's been the weird thing is, and we've onboarded 2 or 3 other operational staff that are still working remotely and still doing their treasury jobs, whereas normally they'd be through 1-2 rounds of interviews face to face, and that's not stopped any of the process. What has stopped is that some of the more senior positions have been paused. I think as we start to come into September, I particularly think it is going to pick up because I think it follows more natural terms. We're entering into, now we're doing this recording end of July, going into August, this vacation season. People still are going to take their holiday, going to take a break, whether it's more of a staycation, it doesn't really matter. People are still going to use that. Come September, October, it's going to pick up. I think what is different, and Craig, you sort of prompted me, we've got our salary survey, which we'll perhaps come on to, but one of the things that when I was doing a lot of the consideration of this, if you look at the level of businesses, so many have taken massive knockbacks. And one of the things here, so you look at aerospace, for instance, retail, no footfall because no people to walk around. The recruitment industry itself, some of the larger recruitment companies have made massive cutbacks. Those are the losers in this situation, whereas you've got some of the winners might be more utility groups, so gas, electric, food delivery services, technology companies, and anyone that was manufacturing webcams is absolutely loving it now. You've got those and privately held companies, because in the past sometimes when they're competing against public companies, they're doing well as a big corporate, everything else. Those guys have been absolutely knocked sideways, which has meant that the follow-on effect is that people would get their bonus based on the turnover of the PLC or the success, profitability of the PLC, that they're gone. everyone will say, oh yeah, my bonus is in the last quarter or first quarter. They're not here. That's not going to be happening this year, or they might recover part way. And so that anchor, if you like, to holding them into their employment, that's disappearing now. That's off, which is in itself going to be an interesting one. I think it'll be a more fluid year for recruitment later on in the year. So, but yeah, look out. I think it could be, I'm hopeful of a busier time. I think people are getting used to this new norm again, and, we'll get on from there, really.
Yeah. And I guess as we look at from a geographical perspective, US, UK, Europe, maybe other areas, any one of those rebounding faster than the others?
Well, Europe takes a longer vacation throughout the summer. They tend to, but that was actually later into close down, but now is already starting to build up a bit earlier. We were quite surprised. We're doing a lot of work actually, and if anyone wants to work in the Middle East, we've got a number of roles, and those guys are just carrying on. They're just, I'm recruiting 3 or 4 very major positions out there, and I'm like, wow. UK, it's ticking over. The US has, well, certainly for us, we've seen it properly stopped. There was a little bit of are we coming back to life for a bit? It's come to a halt at the moment. I'm talking to a number of clients, but when I'm talking to them, it's the typical situation. And what I mean by that, when they're looking to recruit, and they say, look, if I kick off this campaign, Mike, well, the CFO is going to be away for the next 2 weeks. Okay, fine. And then actually I'm away for a week, and okay. So there's that sort of knock-on effect that when I'm talking to them, they say, well, actually, should we just kick off things in September? And I think that might also help. We do predominantly a lot of work in the East Coast, around Chicago and things like that. They're very busy areas for us. That's starting to show a return to life, but, probably 50% on what it was this time last year. And but I think that's an artificial thing. I think it is, because when I'm talking to clients, they're saying, well, actually, we're just going to wait till post-summer. Everyone will be back and around. California's gone into a second lockdown virtually. I think that's really tough for the guys out there. And people are saying, we're going to recruit in this lockdown. People want to meet people. And there's economic things, and if other people in the team are on vacation, there's an increased workload, and you need a full team to be able to then focus your efforts on the recruitment piece as well. So, yeah, I fully expect it to get back to more normal levels of recruitment, more fluidity, September through to December. Well, September onwards, really. I think slow start. October will be flying.
Does the job situation, this activity in hiring and recruiting, does that precede rebound or let's call it full employment, or does it trail?
It usually trails it, to be honest. And again, it's sort of it's funny. It's that, and I speak for Treasury recruitment. I'm a Treasury recruitment specialist, but what I mean is when I talk to some of my friends in other financial recruitment areas. I've started to speak to some of those guys, and they're seeing some recovery. They're doing, they're busier than we are, and they always will be, and they always seem to have been. My rule of thumb is that we're usually busier 3 to 6 months after some of those guys, and also when there's a downturn, and I don't know 100% the facts, but when there's a downturn, a lot of the time we're still busy for another 3 months, and then then our market catches a cold. Maybe it's just the nature of Treasury. A lot of the people we talk with, low volume, high value. So typically speaking, Treasury professionals are very highly qualified, know their finance stuff. A lot of some of those guys I talk to, they're recruiting at more junior finance recruitment levels. So they might have, and also less planned, as it were. So when they might pick up the phone, a client's doing new projects, they say, right, we want 4 FP&A guys, and we want this and we want that. I don't get a phone call which ever says, hey, I need 4 treasurers. I wish I did. It'd be a great Christmas that time. But you don't get that. You get, Mike, our treasurer's going to move on in 3 months, or he's coming to retirement, or she is, or she might be going off maternity leave. Actually, we're going to need someone for a year. It's a much more planned. Oh, I'm talking to them now. When's that going to kick off? Oh, November. It's a much more strategic, planned changes a lot of the time. That's what happens within Treasury, I think, in general.
In terms of working from home and career mobility, you mentioned the Middle East. You've got a number of high-level jobs open. Does this, hey, we're living in the work from home environment, and that might become the normal environment, it seems. Does this mean that treasurers are going to be working in lots of different locations that might differ from where their company's headquarters is? I know some people have like, hey, I'm moving to the beach or I'm moving someplace else. A couple anecdotes about that. They tended to travel anyway, and they just said, I'm going to live where I want as long as I have high internet and can get to a major airport. I'm good. Is that going to change where people are working from?
I think it will, based on its country. So in the US, it's much more practical that you might have someone Midwest, doing a lot more, exactly as you say there, Craig, with your anecdote, that they might have been traveling for work before. They might not have to travel so much now, but it might be 1 week out. Again, when I was talking to a client just last night, actually, and he was talking about that 1 to 2 weeks out of 4, he will go to the headquarters, which is a plane flight away. He'll either do, 2 weeks there and then 2 weeks back home, and it doesn't make that much of a difference for him, the actual thing is, as you say, people don't have to be in work all the time. They can Zoom. I think there will be greater flexibility in working. And it's funny, actually, my colleague, Katie, was talking about the European markets. And I'll just bring it back to that. She sort of said that working from home isn't alien in Europe, but most businesses set up to accommodate this prior to COVID. Yeah, they were. But the actual fact, I then made a comment, but often it wasn't practical. But actually, I think it was also frowned upon. It was, he's at home this week, is he? Oh, right, okay. So he's not actually working all the time. Is he picking up the kids from school, or is he walking the dog? No, people were in their home offices, probably working sometimes longer hours. And people have said that there's been a lot of longer working a lot of the time. And then, if you didn't travel for an hour and a half, did you then spend that actually getting up at 8 a.m. Or at the desk rather for 8 a.m. and still there at 8 p.m. sometimes? And I think actually there's been a lot of that. But coming back to the geographic question, I think, certainly I've seen that in the UK. I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it reflected somewhat in the US. I haven't seen it a huge amount because I think at the time when we were doing some of our searches, our first search was locally anyway. So if we were looking in New York, there's a massive population of New York Treasury professionals, and the same as Chicago, and the same in a couple of other locations. So we were able to look locally first of all. I think now the gloves are off a little bit. It does mean that, say one of the UK roles that I recruited, the treasurer there said, well, actually this new working from home, they don't have to come to the office, full stop. We would like them to pop in maybe once a month, at month end, just to sort of help with that process. But that could be an overnight trip. They come down, do the Tuesday, Wednesday, right, see you in 18 days' time. And, I think it's actually a new way of working. I think it really opens things up. I think we talked before, Craig, about would this also make people more international? Like, could someone in the UK do, an international role into the US or vice versa? I've actually, when I've spoken to a couple of people and thought it through, I think the time zone differences make a heck of a difference. So it actually makes it quite tough. It's also, as I say, I'm recruiting these roles in Saudi Arabia. The actual time differences do present a real challenge with the US. We were having a conference call just the other day. It was 6 o'clock in the morning in the US. It was late in the afternoon for Saudi, and I was talking to them from London. So it was right in between all of that. There was one time peak time slot for all of us, but then immediately went the other way. So I think that would be more challenging, as it were.
Yeah, I wanted to shift and bring the last part of the discussion to the salary survey you run continually. You run it every year. I know there's a period where it's particularly emphasized for people taking it. And we'll include a link in the podcast notes so people can continue to take that. But I wanted to hear if there's anything that you found that represents some sort of dramatic shift or something that's accelerating, decelerating, or some new finding that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, it's funny. Craig bullied me before this call because you know what he's like, listeners. He's a pushy man. He wants the facts. He's going to make me work for my my bread and soup.
No free lunch.
No, exactly. Never is with Mr. Jeffrey. I'd still buy him a beer though. But anyway, that's a different thing. Right. I looked at last year's survey and some of the figures from there. And last year's survey was too big. We had a great amount of information, but overly big. And it was great because we've got that great template and we're bringing it down and concentrating more on the facts and figures, which people really want to know. In terms of the figures, as Craig very kindly said, you just go to treasurysalary.com, you take part, 2 minutes. And Craig asked me, when does it stop? It never stops. This is the amazing thing, that every 6 months we ask people to update their information, just check, and it continues to roll and grow and grow and grow. And then we can take snapshots as we go and we can see where it was. So I look back at the snapshot of last year and, just looking at some of the facts and figures, and I was looking at, so currently we have 75% men in the survey, 25% women. We need more ladies, but one of the things I haven't done, which we will do in analysis, is just what levels, are taking part. These, are all the treasury managers happen to be ladies, or, we're going to deep dive in some of that and produce that for some of the people that read it. So this year in the survey, I've noticed that about 2/3 of people are happy and 1/3 are unhappy. And a lot of the time when I've deep dive into that, it's about self-direction. Whereas last year, in actual fact, overall, and particularly at the senior levels, a lot more people were happy. So you're talking up around the 80-90% mark, sort of, I think it was 85% in certain categories. And people say, oh, well, that varies, and it does. So treasury analysts, you're the unhappiest people, so keep on registering, keep calling me. But as you become a treasurer, you're happiest in your career, and there's a direct correlation. And when I've interviewed people and found out it's about self-direction, it's about actualization. If you're an analyst, you might be told every week what to do by your boss. If you're a treasurer, you might sit with your CFO and say, right, the targets for this year are this, and I'll see you in a month. And, it's not just that, that's a blanket phrase, but it's generally, has an effect on your happiness. But actually, again, one of the things that I've seen has changed this year is we're currently running at 76% of our survey are considering new opportunities. People were happier, or there were less people looking before, similar size at the time, but in actual fact, I think it was down in the sort of 60s, late 60s. It's not too much of a move, but in actual fact, more people are considering new opportunities. Only issue is, there are none. Yeah. Well, it's static. I was like, let me out, sort of thing. Someone said to me the other bit, well, hang on, if there is no bonus, surely people won't look to move. And I said, no, that's not the case. And they're like, why? I said, well, everyone like this, everyone's going to look to move whether or not they're getting a bonus. Now, whether or not there are jobs there, that's a different story, and that's just down to the markets and things like that. So, yeah, it was interesting actually looking at a lot of the figures, and the only other, not the only other, but one of the other stats I always find amazing is when we go through it and we ask people why they're happy, unhappy, why are you looking for a new job? And it's a salary survey. And typically you might expect, it's about the money. It's about the money. On a scale of the 10 factors, money usually is number 7, if not 8, every time. That the people that are bothered about, it's about your boss being nice to you. It's about learning things. It's about it's all the other factors rather than it's work doesn't make it. I've got poor boss manager, work-life balance. You've got all those, and then why do people happy? Good work-life balance, good boss manager. People are actually people, and it's the other factors. It's not just the paycheck at the end of the month, even though we assess people's paychecks at the end of the month. That's what we do. I find that dichotomy really interesting every time, that it's never changed. When I first ever did it 15 years ago and started the salary survey, I thought it's going to say, oh, everyone's annoyed about their money and that's why they're registering. It never was. It's about every other factor. And, they want to be paid fairly, but the other factors are the things that push them or drag them in the door or push them out the door.
Your comment about the increased level of unhappiness or decreased level of happiness and the distinction between the levels is interesting. And I'm also wondering, do you capture other demographic information like age or things like that? Do we get happier as we get older in the careers? Are we more impatient earlier, more impatient later?
We capture information such as the amount of women because we're able to measure that and things like that. I would love to. I mean, I can probably guess most people's ages because I know a lot of the, I know all the participants. We verify them ourselves. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to ask it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd be in court. You've got an ageist survey. No, but it's no. I've asked about that in the past. It's very tricky. But it's funny, as you say there, I get a lot of feedback on the Zoom calls we do with the groups, and people say, oh, I'm a 50-year-old and, I'm not getting the opportunities. What do you advise? And we try and give advice in the situations. But again, a lot of the time, I think people do get hung up on age. We can make age, a powerful weapon, and it can be used for good and evil. But I sort of try and coach people that yes, there are always going to be some companies recruiting that are ageist.
No, I guess I was thinking personally. I remember being very impatient early in my career. I wanted new opportunities, new responsibility, like instantly, and it's like, what, a week has gone by. Why haven't things happened? And I suspect I've mellowed a bit in that impatience. So that was the source of that. Those are some really great headlines and information. But are there any other trends that you see emerging, or former trends that have stopped or reversed in this?
More, it's going to probably. If we get a big surge of people taking part, which would be great in the survey, please do take part. Treasurysalary.com, just got to drop it in there. When I started to compare it year on year and look at some of the salaries, I think there will be, I want to do more analysis, but the trend I'm seeing at the moment is that salaries have continued to increase, but it's been more of a marginal increase. So again, without doing detailed, in-depth analysis, but I am seeing, people said, oh no, that's it, all salaries have stopped and everything else. When people are in the roles they've been in, there has been, until now, a marginal increase. But bearing in mind, we've, the COVID's only been here for, in place for 4 to 6 months. There will be, I'm going to have some interesting conversations with some of these guys in aerospace, talking to them and, talking to the guys in retail, because, we've heard and we know of some of our clients that have had to take 20% pay cuts for periods of time just to, take a real haircut and say, look, if you can't take it, there's the door. And they say, no, we'll take it. Thank you very much. But what we've also seen is that the flip side, these delivery, food services, technology, they've been more resilient than this. Is that going to impact on their salaries? The answer is we don't know fully yet. I think we will, again, I'll be not just anecdotally, but trying to deep dive with some of those guys to understand how it has affected them and wanting to know exactly what they found. I don't know what what you've heard from your listeners or some of the guys that you have spoken to, Craig, just to flip it back, a question on my own, but have you heard from some of those, those clients, or what the effect has been on their employment sort of thing? Or
yeah, I mean, I think I think you described something as a pause or static as that being the case with quite a bit on the salary front. I mean, some organizations furloughs, take a week off a month, or you've got to take 2 weeks, or 20%, 25% pay cut. A number of those things, especially as people were, taking that fort mentality. We've got to shore up liquidity. How do we stop the outflow while we're seeing how things settle out. So it's a time where it's hard to measure in the midst of this. So I think your words were wise, and I look forward to seeing more information on your analysis from that. That'll be quite fascinating to see how this may have disrupted.
Well, I started to see it come back though as well. That's one of the things is that, I spoke to a client again. Well, this client I spoke to today, he said they'd sort of been prepared to have a cut. They said that we might have to. They didn't in the end. But also a couple of other clients I've heard from, one of which said, again, they did take a cut, but actually only lasted a couple of months and, reduced work, reduced hours, reduced salary. Well, now actually said, oh, yeah, no, things are getting back to normal. So, all right, said, yeah, no, we're back full time. They're bringing back the furloughed guys. Actually, they're not taking a grant that they were thinking about taking. So it's sort of, again, goes back to earlier on the show. People didn't know what to expect because it was brand new. And it was like, oh, this is fresh, and how do we do this? People have dealt with it now, and they've sort of got over it a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I know we've covered a number of topics. Any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
Just keep up the good fight, people. It is getting back to normal. I think if you need Treasury career advice, well, you know where to get it. So give us a call. I'm very happy to, always have a chat with people. And, I love listening to Craig's podcast, and we interview a treasurer every week. So I'll do a quick, treasurycareercorner.com. Go there, listen to the best treasurers. After you've listened to Strategic Treasurer, of course, listen to that, and then, bookmark me as well. That's fine. Bit of shameless self-promotion there. That's not bad. And I think, general terms, I think, all these the Treasury people we talk to, Treasury dudes, this go back to the beginning. This is what Treasury professionals were born to do. Planning, getting through a financial crisis. And I'm seeing everybody recovering from it now. And it's, how we've come out of it. It's a different world, with, different kind of working patterns and everything else. I think at the end of the day, everyone should be proud of what they've done so far. And I'm very hopeful for the rest of the year. It's going to be different, but it's still got their strengths. And I think Treasury professional, I can't wait to see people will start to see each other next year and have that networking. And I can't wait to see more Treasury people and get together again and see you, Mr. Jeffrey, for a beer or three.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.